There's a specific kind of quiet that happens right before someone tells the truth. Not silence exactly, more like the moment just before, when the words are already forming and the only thing left is deciding whether to let them out. Most people never do. They carry it home. They set it down beside the bed. They pick it back up in the morning like it belongs to them now, like keeping it is just part of who they are. I exhale slowly because some things need a second before they start. This is a place for the things people carried for too long. A boyfriend who knew something and said nothing. A father who chose a fact over a son. A stranger who did something extraordinary and never told a soul. Tonight, someone finally said it out loud. You're allowed to listen. There's a specific kind of Tuesday that only exists in winter. That was the Tuesday I found out. His name was Daniel. We'd been together 2.5 years when it happened. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. He apologized by sliding his untouched piece of cake across the table to me without a word, just a small, sideways smile. We lived in his apartment on Garfield Street. We had a ritual. Every Sunday, before anything else, before phones or plans or whatever the week had left unfinished, we made breakfast together. It was the part of the week I looked forward to most. I want to tell you something I noticed and didn't notice. About 8 months in, I was looking for ibuprofen in the bathroom cabinet. I saw a prescription bottle pushed toward the back. I just registered it the way you register background noise. I forgot about it completely. The Tuesday it happened, I was home alone. I was working from home, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop and the second cup of coffee. I needed to take something for the headache. The orange bottle was there again. I don't know why I picked it up. I read the label. What I found was that this medication was used to manage a condition. One that, under certain circumstances, could become serious. And I had not known. For 2.5 years, I had not known. I put the laptop down. He came home at 6:30. He was going to make pasta. I let him start the water boiling. I said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah, of course." I said, "The prescription in the cabinet, the one at the back." "What about it?" I said, "What is it for?" "It's old. It's nothing. I don't really take it anymore." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." And then neither of us said anything. I said, "I looked it up, Daniel." What followed was not a fight. He said he hadn't thought it was a big deal. I said it was a big deal to me. He said he was afraid of what I would think. He said the risk was minimal. I said, "That wasn't your call to make for me." He said, "I know." And then he said, "I'm sorry," and I believed him. That night I slept in the bed. At 2 a.m, I got up and took my laptop to the bathroom. I read everything I could find. You know that feeling when you replay a memory and suddenly everything in it looks different? I kept doing that in the days after. Can you trust someone who kept this from you, even if they had reasons? I made my appointment. We're still together. He told me everything eventually. There are Sundays now where we make breakfast and it's the same. There's this one morning I keep coming back to. I keep turning that memory over. Just because I wonder now what safe actually means. I'm still figuring that out. Yeah. I'm just going to sit with that one for a second. Because what he did, what that man did, wasn't just about a diagnosis. It was a decision. A quiet, deliberate decision that he made every single morning for 3 months. Every time he looked at you and said nothing. Every time he had the chance and chose himself instead. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And I think some part of you knew that before you even had the words for it. You know what gets me? It's never really about the thing, the secret, the silence, whatever form it takes. That's just the surface. Underneath it is always the same question. The one you didn't ask out loud because you were afraid of the answer. Was I worth telling the truth to? And I wish I could tell you that's a rare question. I wish I could tell you most people never have to ask it. But I have another letter here. And the person who wrote it, they asked that same question. Not about a partner. about their father, about a man who raised them, or who they thought raised them, until a piece of paper arrived and that man just stopped. No conversation, no grief, just gone. Like the years meant nothing the moment they became inconvenient. I don't know if you're ready for this one. I'm not sure I am either. The jar was already on the table when I got home. That was the first thing I noticed. Ray always waited for me before he took it down from the shelf. That was just how it went. But that night it was already there, sitting in the middle of the kitchen table with no coins around it. Just the jar, like it had been placed there on purpose. I dropped my backpack by the door and called out his name. "I'm in the kitchen." I knew he was in the kitchen. I just needed to hear his voice first. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air is different? Not cold exactly, just thinner somehow. Like the room has already had a hard conversation without you, and you're only now catching up to it. That's what the kitchen felt like that Thursday. Ray was standing at the counter, not sitting, which was unusual. He had his coffee mug in both hands, thumbs hooked over the rim the way he always held it, and he was staring at the window above the sink even though it was dark outside and there was nothing to see. I pulled out my chair. The legs scraped the linoleum the way they always did, that little shriek of sound, and he turned around at that. He looked at me like I'd startled him, like he'd forgotten I was coming. "Hey, Bug." He'd called me Bug since I was small enough to fit in the crook of his arm. I never questioned it. I never questioned anything about us. Not really. That's the part I keep coming back to. I was 14 years old and I had never once thought to ask a single question, because nothing about our life together had ever felt like it needed one. We had our Thursdays. We had the count. I sat down at the table and I reached for the jar because that's what you do, and he said, quietly, not unkindly, just quietly, "Hold on a second, Marie." I held on. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Something I kept telling myself I'd get to and then just didn't." I'm going to sit with that for a second, because even now it's hard to say out loud. Not because of what came after, but because of the way he said should've. Past tense. Like the telling was already overdue. Like I was already behind on knowing something about my own life. "Your mother, she had been gone since you were 2, car accident, that part I knew. Her name was Diane. And Mari, I need you to understand that I wanted you. I always wanted you. But I'm not your biological father." The coins in the jar looked very still. I don't know why that's the detail that got me. The coins, just sitting there in the glass, not moving, while everything else in the room seemed to be tilting sideways. I remember thinking, and this is going to sound strange, I remember thinking that the stacks would have been uneven tonight, that we'd have had too many pennies like we always did. I know. Who is my... He doesn't know you exist. She never told him. And then she was gone and I was already there. I was already your dad. And I didn't know how to unbe your dad. Maybe you've had a moment like that, where someone says something that is clearly meant to be comforting, and it lands like a stone anyway. Not because they're wrong, but because you're not ready to be comforted yet. You're still in the part where the floor just dropped and you need a second to find out where the ground is. I didn't say anything for a long time. I looked at the jar. I looked at his hands, both of them flat on the table now, no longer folded like he'd given up on the formality of it. His wedding ring on the wrong hand because he'd switched it after my mother died. Some private logic of his I'd never asked about. All these things I'd never asked about. Okay. And he looked at me like that was the most heartbreaking word I could have chosen. Maybe it was. I went to my room. I lay on my bed in my jacket and my shoes, and I stared at the ceiling and I let out this slow breath, the kind that doesn't actually help, the kind your body does because it has to do something. And I thought, I am the same person I was an hour ago. I thought, everything in this house is exactly where it was. I thought, his hands were shaking. I don't know how long I lay there. I know that when I finally came back out to the kitchen, the jar was back on the shelf. He'd put it away without me, I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself it was late, it was a school night, we'd do it next week. But something in my chest went very small and very quiet in a way that it didn't come back from for a long time. You know that feeling when you lose something before you have the words to name what it was? That's the closest I can get to describing the next few weeks. I wasn't angry at him, or I was, but it was this formless kind of angry that I didn't know where to put. He'd raised me. He'd been there. He'd done the count with me every Thursday for 9 years. But he'd also known the whole time and said nothing, and I kept turning that over like a coin in my hands. Both sides true, both sides real. We did do the count again. A few weeks later on a Thursday, I came home and the jar was on the table and he was sitting in his chair, waiting, not standing at the counter. Sitting, waiting. I sat down across from him. He turned the jar over, and the coins came spilling out between us, and for a while neither of us said anything. We just stacked. Pennies in one tower, quarters in another. The TV was off that night, which had never happened before, and the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the coins click against each other. You don't have to call me anything different. I know. I wasn't going to. And that was true. I wasn't going to. But the word had changed anyway. Dad. Somewhere between that Thursday and this one, it still fit in my mouth. It still came out the same. But now I knew it was a word we'd both chosen, not a word that had just always been true. And I didn't know yet whether that made it smaller or whether it made it something else entirely. I'm still not sure I know. I'm 22 now and I still think about the jar. I still think about him standing at the window with his coffee mug, thumbs hooked over the rim, staring at his own dark reflection like he was rehearsing something he'd been putting off for years. I think about the way he said I didn't know how to unbe your dad. I think that might be the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me. But I also think about the jar on the shelf, put away without me. And I think some griefs don't have a shape. They just live in the kitchen. They just sit in the space between two people stacking coins in silence, trying to find their way back to something that was real, even if it was never exactly what either of them thought it was. I don't know what to call what we are now. That's the part nobody prepares you for. Not the lie, not even the loss, but the moment when you realize the word you've been using your whole life is still the right word. You're just using it differently now. And you're not sure you had a choice in that. And you're not sure he did either. Some things just sit with you, the particular quiet of being looked at by someone who raised you, and finding nothing familiar looking back. No argument, no door slam, just removal. Like you were always something they could set down. But sometimes I think about the people who took all of that, all that love with nowhere to go, and aimed it somewhere else entirely. Outward, toward people they'd never even meet. This next one is about a man who did exactly that, and I think you're going to want to hear it. Eggs? No runny parts, Dad. I want you to understand that before I tell you anything else. I want you to know exactly what I was protecting before you hear what it cost. She watched me. She was 7, but she watched me. I didn't cry. I just sat there and thought about Saturday mornings. She doesn't know. She has no idea. And she would say yes. She would say yes without understanding what yes meant because she's 7 and she trusts me. I stood there for a long time. You look tired, Dad? I am tired. Did you sleep bad? Yeah, Bug, I slept bad. I have bad sleep sometimes too. I think about stuff. What kind of stuff? Just stuff, whether things are okay. Things are okay. Good. I know the other options. I've read everything. I know what no means. No runny parts. I chose myself. I chose myself, and I told myself it was for her. I don't know what I thought. I don't really know where to start with that. I think about the things people carry around without saying anything. For weeks. For months. Sometimes for years. Just walking through their days with this weight in their chest that nobody else can see, and smiling when they're supposed to smile, and answering I'm good when someone asks, And all the while, there's this whole other thing happening underneath. That's what tonight felt like to me. 3 people, 3 completely different lives, and somehow the same quiet ache running through all of it. The feeling of being left out of something important, left out of information, left out of love, left out of the history of your own life. You know that feeling when you find out something that makes you have to go back and reread everything? Like, the story you thought you were living suddenly has a different author, and you're standing there holding all these memories, trying to figure out which ones are still true? I think that's one of the loneliest feelings there is. And I think a lot of people watching this right now know exactly what I mean. Maybe not from the same situation. Maybe it's something else entirely. But that specific kind of disorientation, when the ground shifts and nobody warned you, I think more of us have stood on that ground than would ever admit it out loud. That last one, though, the man who saved the world, he didn't get a parade. He didn't get a monument. He made the hardest decision a person can make, alone, in the dark, with everything on the line, and then he just went home, lived his life, carried it quietly. I keep thinking about how many people are doing that right now, carrying something enormous, something that maybe nobody else will ever fully understand, and just continuing, just getting up the next morning and continuing. That's not nothing. I want to say that out loud. That is not nothing. This show exists because of the things that don't get said at dinner tables, the things that get swallowed down at the end of a long day because there's nowhere safe to put them. Confessed is, I guess it's just a room where those things can exist, without judgment, without an audience waiting to decide how to feel about you. Just the truth and a little space around it. If you're carrying something like that, something you haven't been able to say anywhere else, the door's open. You can submit your story, anonymously, if you need it that way. We'll sit with it. I promise we'll sit with it carefully. And if anything you heard tonight felt a little too close to home, if something in there mirrored back something you're quietly going through yourself, you don't have to hold that alone either. There are people who will listen, real ones. And reaching out to them isn't weakness, it's just the next thing, one small next thing. I'll leave you with this. Somewhere tonight, someone is finding out something that changes everything. And somewhere else, someone is deciding whether or not to tell the truth. And somewhere else, in some small room, in some ordinary moment, someone is doing the right thing, and no one will ever know. I wonder which one you are. Confessed, new episodes every week. To submit your story, link in the description.